One of the most important things about being a writer is versatility. A competent piece of writing takes good care to avoid preaching to the choir, and instead opts to recontextualize the circumstances of our real lives, pushing us to draw comparisons, to look at things from a different perspective, ultimately transforming these fictional stories about these equally fictional characters into a window into our own souls and beliefs, giving us clarity and in many ways molding the story itself into something completely different. The Summer Hikaru Died is the poster child for this belief. It's a story laden with innuendo, implications, and overall a constant layered feeling that makes you raise an eyebrow at every scene as you ask, what's really happening here? The Summer Hikaru Died is one of the new kids on the block of Netflix anime, and the light novel series it's based on is equally fresh. Releasing in August of 2021, The Summer Hikaru Died is a story about a young man named Yoshiki Tsujinaka, who, in light of realizing his best friend Hikaru Indo has been replaced by some kind of eldritch being, must come to terms with his new reality, as strange occurrences happen all around him, and even his own feelings for Hikaru can't be trusted. Now, just to clarify, in its simplest form, this is not the most original story in the world, but where the Summer Hikaru Died shines is in its exploration of the relationship and dynamics between our two leads. There's a duality here, the implied relationship between the two and the one that's shown on screen as the narrative progresses. It gives the audience the ability to connect with the story on a more personal level, even if the situation depicted is something absurd. Hikaru does this using the tried and true writing fundamental of subtext, the underlying meaning or message that's implied rather than directly stated. In other words, the show shows you this, but it really means this. In this video, we're going to explore the first 3 episodes of The Summer Hikaru Died, discussing the subtextual elements of the series, revealing both the story it tells us directly and the story it could be telling under the surface. So without further ado, grab the one you love, take a seat, and let's talk about how The Summer Hikaru Died uses subtext to tell 2 stories at once. For starters, we need to address the elephant in the room. This is a story with queer themes, and we will be addressing it as such. The relationship between Hikaru and Yoshiki is overtly romantic, and this directly ties into the identity of the show itself. The dynamic between Yoshiki and Hikaru is a driving force of the narrative, and in terms of a power balance, depending on the context presented by the plot, it can be intentionally inconsistent. The first episode of the series goes to great lengths to highlight just how different things have been between the pair since Hikaru went missing in those haunted mountains. And when it's revealed what Hikaru really is, there's an earnest sense of Yoshiki's life being in genuine danger. When looking for the subtext in a narrative, the audience is allowed to take any number of liberties with their interpretation of a work. This is a good thing because it indicates audience engagement, and more overtly, it indicates a presence of purpose in the story itself. This scene has been interpreted by many as Hikaru himself coming out of the closet, thus challenging the worldview that's been pushed on he and Yoshiki for their entire lives and killing the concept of Hikaru as a person, in spite of the fact that he canonically died in January, nowhere near summer. This sounds far-fetched until you really think about the differences Yoshiki points out in Hikaru even after the reveal. There are no questions about the anatomy of the beast itself. The most we get is a throwaway line halfway through the episode confirming the creature is inhabiting Hikaru's body. But the changes in demeanor and verbiage is what really gets to Yoshiki. The fake Hikaru, in exploring and learning the emotions of its new body, is more outgoing and affectionate, clingy if you will. This is the behavior of someone who's just confessed to their crush, not an otherworldly being tormenting a lonely teenager. And while the monster itself is of course the star of the show, the fact that the challenges Yoshiki faces are more emotional in nature rather than physical go to great lengths to show just what part of him is being threatened the most. The rest of the episode is rather uneventful, exploring the old dynamics between the two and showing how effortlessly the monster emulates Hikaru's behavior. Yoshiki's world feels like it's crumbling. He's screaming at himself in his own head. He knows this isn't right, and that this isn't the Hikaru he knows and loves. But perhaps, for his own selfish purposes, he doesn't mind. Because this is the first time Hikaru has ever said that he likes him. Episode 2 is a lot more intentional in developing the town itself and in using the monster as an instrument for innuendo, at least when it's not doing monster shit. There's a lot of focus on physicality in this episode. Yoshiki, for assumedly the first time, is getting the opportunity to see Hikaru in some real compromising positions. Of course, there's always the knowledge in the back of his mind that this isn't Hikaru, and with that knowledge comes a layer of guilt that's shown in his general bashfulness in these positions, the sinful lust for the body of the innocent, the desecration of the body of the dead. However you choose to look at it, one thing reigns true. In getting the chance to explore Hikaru both emotionally and physically, Yoshiki's entire perception of his best friend is changing. The monster itself could even be seen as a manifestation of this desire, where it's uncertain and obviously nervous in its emotional presentation. It has no problem taking the lead in these more lewd encounters, almost like some kind of fantasy. It's strangely comfortable being in these kinds of positions with Yoshiki, in spite of the fact that there was never any real indication of this in their friendship beforehand. This is the monster. This is what the monster wants, what Yoshiki wants, even if the very setting in which he resides makes him feel unable to express that openly. There's a scene near the end of the second episode where Yoshiki is pelted with questions about his personal life. In a small town like this could be seen as simple concern, a conversation that's to be expected in a place where everyone knows everything about everyone else. For Yoshiki, however, this is anxiety-inducing. He sweats nervously where he stands because he can't stand someone being so aware. In the context of the actual narrative, this is simply him not wanting anyone to come close to finding out Hikaru's true nature. But from a subtextual standpoint, this is a traditional town with traditional values, and this woman, if she pays enough attention, could easily discover the true connection between Yoshiki and Hikaru. The monster that haunts him could be revealed, and that scares him more than anything, so perhaps he should avoid getting too close. Before we get to episode 3, I feel like I need to make something very clear. This video is not a plot summary of the Summer Hikaru Died. There's a bunch of lore and characters that I didn't even mention in this video on purpose, and that's because the Summer Hikaru Died is a monster story first and a love story second. The subtext put on display in the narrative is not merely a mask for a story the creator was too scared to tell, but an accent for the story that the creator passionately did tell and is telling. There's a litany of other directions and encounters that add so much more to the story than just yandere monster boy hijinks, and I genuinely don't want you to get the wrong idea about the messages or intentions of the series simply because I want to prove a point on the internet. The show is amazing, even if you don't care for the romantic subtext. Watch it. You won't be disappointed. Episode 3 is the most loaded of the first 3 episodes, and with good reason. It's the big climax that cements the relationship between Yoshiki and Hikaru moving forward, and in many ways, it's the conclusion of the introduction to the series. It's also the first time that the tables turn between our 2 leads, and we see that threatening dynamic in the first episode erode for something potentially more toxic, but ultimately worth exploring. At this point in the narrative, Yoshiki is growing comfortable with the illusion of normalcy that he's forced to consume he and Hikaru's relationship. He's not completely happy or even handling it well, but a fake Hikaru in his eyes is better than no Hikaru. There's a bit more build up to the monster shit in this episode, with much of the episode itself focusing on Yoshiki's interaction with a woman named Rie Kuribayashi, who claims to have encountered a similar entity in the form of her husband. To keep a long story short, she did exactly what Yoshiki is doing now, pretending like everything is fine, attempting to accept the change that this being has brought to her life, only for it to lash out and hurt one of their children in the process. She's a walking cautionary tale, a possible future in the context of this narrative, and a sign for Yoshiki to finally start being honest with himself, whatever that may mean in the future. The resulting confrontation with Hikaru in the empty school is the culmination of many of the ideas we've discussed in this video. Everything is there. From the overt rejection of Hikaru's feelings, the physical violence at the hands of the monster that we knew it was capable of from the beginning, and ultimately, the sparing of Yoshiki's life. Hikaru loves him too much to kill him. Now, what does this mean subtextually? How can I spin this into a possible situation in a boys kissing boys relationship? Well, This is one of the more literal scenes. Yoshiki, still attempting to uphold some sense of normalcy in his life, conforms to the town around him and their warnings against his actions. He rejects his own emotions in favor of doing what he believes is the right thing, which is new considering how selfish he's shown himself to be capable of being. Whether this is a step forward or not depends on who you ask, but overall, this is a big shift in their dynamic regardless. Yoshiki's acceptance of the new Hikaru in the end of the episode can also be seen as him finally accepting the emotions he's been feeling, accepting the monster, if you will. And just for a bit of garnish on this they're totally just really close friends pie, Hikaru's words in this scene are reminiscent of a girl begging to stay with her partner, even accepting unfaithfulness in exchange for continued interaction. I know this is a lot to take in, especially if you're not used to thinking about stories this deeply, or if you simply can't help but think that I'm dragging this a bit. Not everything needs to have a deeper meaning. Some stories can be taken at face value, so does all of this subtext really make the Summer Hikaru Died better? Does the two main boys wanting to be with one another somehow make it worth watching in a way it wouldn't have been otherwise? Well, that's ultimately a matter of opinion. But might I reference a point I made earlier in this video? The stories we consume are at their best when they resonate with us on a personal level, when we can connect ourselves to the characters and their experiences. Now, most people aren't body snatchers or gay or otherwise, but we've all felt trapped at a certain point in our lives. We've all deeply cared for someone and seen how love itself changes them. People's behavior shifts with deeper emotional connection, and this can be confusing and annoying when dealing with it for the first time. The Summer Hikaru Died aims to tell a story about a monster wreaking havoc on a small town, but it also aims to share that confusion with the audience. The awkward moments, the feeling that you're making a mistake, that you're some kind of monster for feeling what you feel for the people around you, or that you're in the wrong for just wanting things to stay simple and comfortable and safe. Why can't things just be the same forever, right? The Summer Hikaru Died is two stories in one. One about confronting the monsters in your life in spite of yourself, and another about the possibility that the monster isn't something to be shunned in the first place. My name is John Sage, and thanks for watching.